Here we are, Brian Fleming in the house, dude. Welcome to the Timmy Gibson Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's a real pleasure. It's been nice, kind of meeting you through the Facebook group, the Timmy's Deconstruction community. Yeah, it's been real fun seeing your journey and your wife on there.
Man, I
And
can't I can't tell you how valuable that group is because here's what happened. When I started deconstructing, I started putting my thoughts on my Facebook. Well, you'll hear a little bit about my story here in a few minutes, but basically for the past 15 years I've been traveling as an evangelist. So like 99% of my following is evangelical Christian. And I'll get into more later, but boy, you
yeah,
start posting your real thoughts and questions. Uh, Timmy's Deconstruction Group is a safe haven. I don't
yay,
like the words. I don't like the word safe space, but
yeah,
it's an oasis in the desert where you can kind of express yourself and ask questions without getting sniper fire.
yeah. And that's why I started it, Brian. The funny thing
Okay.
is the one, you're right. So I looked into anybody that asks to join the group. I go to their Facebook and I kind of just look around, make sure they're not trying to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, as they say, and they're trying to get in there as a Christian and trying to get us saved or whatever. So I went to your deal and I was looking at your Facebook and I was like, wait a minute, this guy, I think he's speaking in churches. I'm like, I don't know if this guy's really an atheist or not. And then I saw a couple of your other, I was like, oh, okay. I think this is, a new-ish journey, or it came across to me. I was like, maybe this is a newer part of his story. And so, yeah, clearly, obviously, we let you come in, and it's just been great.
Well,
You've been posting a lot, which is great.
if you saw my post about uh, Robert Morris, whose church I used to attend and be involved with, you would know for certain what side of the fence I'm on. And I got out of about 4,300 friends I think I have on there on the personal one. I think I got about 3 likes and no comments. It was fucking crickets.
Dude,
I'm
that
like, oh, I'm not surprised at this point. Like nobody, and I reeled that thing. I mean, anyway, I won't go into that right
yeah.
now.
Well, I want to talk to you about that because I actually I met Robert Morris, and I actually went to his church too for a couple pastor conferences. And so, yeah, we may have crossed paths at some point. You never know, man.
Yeah,
Uh,
I may have spoken your church.
yeah, let's see. When was I back there? I was down in, is that Dallas, Texas?
Yeah, it's in South Lake, which is like in between Dallas Fort Worth, like the
Yeah,
mid
it's like
cities in
Gateway
between.
Church or something. There's another Gateway Church that pastor wrote a book called No Perfect People Allowed, I think. There's another Gateway Church, but that's not the one that Robert Morris pastored. Anyway, I went to that
Hmm.
church, Robert Morris's church, and yeah, I actually did an episode about him and a little bit about that story. But okay, so before we get too deep into, because I know we could probably talk for hours, which is great. That's why having you on here. So tell us your story. What was like the first card that fell for you as an evangelist that you were like, you know what, maybe this is bullshit.
Yeah, it wasn't one thing. I will start by saying this. I woke up at some point in the middle of my life and I realized I'm not the person I've been taught I'm supposed to be.
Hmm.
And for the first time, really realizing I've been taught I'm supposed to be one way and who I actually am just is not.
Hmm.
And so that came about, I'm 40 right now. That came about probably 3 years ago. There's a lot to unpack there. We probably don't have time for, but that was kind of the beginning. I was in the military prior to. I grew up Catholic. Um, at 12 years old, my parents divorced. I figured if by 12 years I'm not getting it, I'm not getting it, and so I never went back. Uh, Found an Assemblies of God youth group in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I thought, hey, they got pizza and a live band and smoke and mirrors and fog and lights and live music. So I thought, hey, this is way better than the old lady on the organ at the Catholic church. So they kind of got me there. And it was good for me at the time, what I was going through. But I spent the next 20 years from about 16 to about 36, 37, kind of, within, the AG. And so I joined the military in 2003, straight out of high school. Afghanistan was kicking off, obviously, and Iraq was soon to come. Went to Afghanistan, got blown up twice. My vehicle did, ran over a bomb on the road on April 18th of 06. And then I actually walked away from that one. And then a couple months later, on July 24th, a suicide bomber drove his minivan into my door of my vehicle in Kandahar.
Oh
and then with that one, I actually got injured. I woke up laying in a ditch on the side of Highway 1 there in Kandahar. I had no idea what happened. My helmet had been blown off my head. I had second-degree burns on my face and neck. My hands were third-degree. Skin grafts, 14 months at a medical center in San Antonio. That was like a big, life-changing event, obviously.
Yeah.
And how did I go from that into to a ministry speaking setting? Because you don't really come home and say, I'm going to go talk about my war experiences in front of people.
Right.
Especially like that. I won't bring up his name because he would probably very much disagree with my deconstruction of the guy who mentored me. But if you've been around the AG at all, you most definitely would know who this person is if I said his name. I have so much respect for him. Changed my life. He was an evangelist too, and taught me how to use my story. So there was a lot of benefit to learning how to tell my story in a way that had purpose. And so that is one thing that I think Christianity sort of gave me a framework to kind of like make a sense making device. Not the only one, but it was one. And that's kind of what led me on that journey. Then I realized, it was helping people. I talked a girl out of suicide who had been abused. That was the big wake up. And then they started paying me money. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, I remember getting that first check. And I'm like, I used to work 3 months for this much. And I just spoke for a half hour. And these people want to like keep going. So
Yeah.
I'm like, this churches pay money?
Yes, they do.
You mean I can make a living? I can, because I was getting out of the military. I was injured. I had traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress, all these issues. So, working a conventional job was kind of like, I would have. But anyway, that kind of led me into the speaking and into the evangelism. But to answer your question, one of the things that always bothered me, especially in the charismatic circles, was there's so much emphasis on speaking in tongues. Now, I never did that. They told me 52 different ways to get to it. Just let God do it, not doing it right, not God's time. But in that fellowship, denomination, whatever they want to call themselves, the AG, there is a giant emphasis on, well, you're not filled with the Holy Spirit if you don't speak in tongues.
That's right.
Well,
It's the evidence.
It's the evidence, the initial physical evidence of the filling of the Holy Spirit. I went to Bible college too. So I went to Southwestern Assemblies of God University. So I went to Bible college after, shooting at people in Afghanistan. It's kind of an interesting dynamic to think about. Like everyone's behind me, like, yeah, go kill them. And then they're like, yeah, save them. And it's like,
right. Jesus loves them.
Yeah, maybe I should have I don't know, like if we're our mission is to save them, my grenade launcher isn't probably the best tactic, but so went to Bible college there, and there was a number of things like the speaking in tongues. It never happened. Apparently, God's supposed to do it. Well, God never did it. People trying to smack you on the forehead oh, you fell over. I'm not saying that doesn't happen for people. I'm just saying for me, I guess I always felt like I was too real for God, if that's what it took, because I wasn't going to fake anything. And the falling down thing never happened. The speaking in tongues thing never happened. I'll tell you one of the big things was when I started asking critical, intelligent questions. Really, and Bible college was sort of the beginning of the undoing of the deconstruction, because there were things they were teaching that are dogmatically and doctrinally correct for them, but it was like for every opposition I had, every like intelligent question, it seemed like there was like a folded, neatly handed to them answer, which that's Christian apologetics,
right?
But those answers didn't always really resolve. It was like just kind of good enough for them, but I was still like, yeah, but that doesn't answer the question. That doesn't, how can God love us, love all of us, and die for us, yet he told the same God in the other part of the Bible told people to go kill their neighbors
Yeah.
and their babies and their animals. But
Keep
in the
those
other part,
virgins, though. Keep those virgins.
yeah, because that was definitely God. But it's like, then in the New Testament, it's like he's like, oh, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's like, that's good. But what about all those Amalekites and Canaanites and their babies? And, like, think about it practically.
Yeah.
There wasn't sniper fire back then. They had swords and machetes, man. Like, if you were to go into a village and kill people, their children are watching you hack their friends and family to death, and then you're coming for them.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really, got to me when I started hearing Christian leaders say things like this, and William Lane Craig was one of them. See, like I said, I literally encountered a radical Islamic suicide bomber in Afghanistan. He was the only one who died that day, but he believed God was telling him to kill himself, to kill other people. Well, in evangelical Christianity, they talk about that Jesus loves you, but you ask about, well, what about the same God telling people to go kill their neighbors and their babies? And do you know, like, traumatic that is and how terrible and evil that is and what that must have been like? And one thing I heard William Lane Craig say, he's like a big name in
I know
Christianity.
who that joker is.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. But like, one of the most insane things I heard him say one time, and people went along with it. He said, a lot of those babies that the children of the Amalekites and the Canaanites that God told them to kill, he said, they're kids, so they go to heaven. So really, God was actually giving a blessing to these kids by killing them. And he literally said that. That's literally what he said. And he said it was kind of a blessing because they didn't have to grow up and then have a chance to go to hell.
No.
And I'm just thinking, like, I've been to war. Like, I've seen like violence at its worst.
Yeah.
And it's fucking insane. It's indescribable. It's ineffable, like what it's like to be in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
And like I said before, these people were using machetes and swords and maybe bows and arrows and rocks to kill each other and bash each other's head. And we're doing these kids a favor. God's blessing them by doing this. Is that really the best like they can come up with?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing godly about that. There's nothing. And the thing is, lots of Christians, I say evangelicals especially, because I consider them the extreme Christians.
Yes.
Just like radical Islam, the radical terrorist, like 9/11 kind of stuff. They both believe that God is telling them to do things to excuse death or murder, whether God's doing it or God's telling someone to do it. And that's really concerning to me.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I can't resolve. It's like, oh, he's a loving God. Well, it's okay to say that when you're not on the side of the people getting murdered.
Right.
But when you're safe and your family's safe, I would love to ask William Lane Craig, hey, how many grandchildren do you have? And give me 5 minutes with them, me and my AR-15, and we'll see how much you feel like God is blessing your grandchildren if I take them all out.
Right.
And it's funny how I know he wouldn't agree with that.
Right.
So what is this shit?
Yeah.
These excuses, yeah.
So were you because you know my story. I grew up as well in the Assemblies of God. I'm a former fundamental evangelical Bible thumping, tongue talking, Holy Ghost rolling preacher. And I did that, for 30 years, 48 years. Yeah. Glory to Jesus. And so I went to Central Bible College, CBC. I was an ordained Assembly of God minister. And then, I got kicked out because I drank a wine cooler. And
that was the line.
Yeah, that was it. That was it for
2% alcohol.
I can't. Yeah, exactly. It's like drinking.
Not even a hint, Timmy. Not even a hint.
Avoid the very appearance of evil. So you were raised Assemblies of God. So then you were a literalist. Like the Bible was literally true. Jesus literally died, resurrected. He's coming back and the earth is young and Adam and Eve. Like you believed all that.
I was taught all that. I generally went along with it, but I've always also been kind of a skeptic because of, my pretty harsh life experience.
Yeah.
I don't just take someone's word for it. And so I did have my questions and skepticism, but nothing really came up that was generally big enough for me to just blow it out. But one of the things that always frustrated me was the combativeness of Christians whenever I would ask those questions.
Yes.
And it's like we don't need to defend truth. It is what it is.
Right. If it's true, it'll still be true after scrutiny.
Yeah. And if you're just asking an honest question, what's with the resistance? Or if they tell you their answer, but you don't accept it because it doesn't resolve and they don't realize that you're thinking deeper than they are,
Yeah.
and then they just get angry. That's more like a sign that the ego's involved,
Yeah.
which is not very spiritual, I think, in any spiritual system on earth. The ego is usually the enemy. But yeah, and just so it was almost like it was kind of like in Bible college when I took like the theology and apologetics class. Like I know all the arguments,
Yeah.
I know all the rebuttals. I was
Yeah.
trained in them, just like you probably were. And so there came a point with those rebuttals, the arguments against the questions I was asking, where it feels like people in ministry weren't taught to think any deeper than like that first layer of resistance. And so it's like they didn't know what to say. And then it's like, well, God, or well, just,
His ways
we'll
are
only
above my
know.
ways.
He's mysterious. We won't know until the other side of eternity. It's just like, that's not an answer, you
Right.
know? And these are like serious questions, serious things that affect our lives and our world.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things. It was just, it was the combativeness and the lack of honest, intelligent answers for a lot of the big questions about life I had.
Yeah. What was the one that made you go, I'm out? Like this, I can't do this anymore. Because I know like many people don't understand, Christians, having been a Christian for so long, I've said this before. I would have never in a million years, Brian, never in a million years would have thought that I would have ever walked away from my faith. It
Oh,
was,
same.
I was absolutely certain of it. In fact, I would have said, I know there's a God and I know Jesus died for me and I know he's coming back. I mean, I was just absolutely certain of it. And it's much like, I referenced this before, it's much like the Truman Show. If you've seen the show, he
Yeah.
lived in the Truman world, and so anytime he started asking any questions that seemed to go outside of the Truman Show, that's when he got the resistance and shame and the guilt and all the same stuff that they do in Christianity. That they have answers for all the questions, but they're inside of Truman world. It all stays capsulated in that world. And when you're a deep thinker like yourself and like myself, eventually, I was bumping up against the edge of Truman world and going, yeah, I think there's something else out there. No, there's nothing out there. Don't look over there. Stay in here, And then you just kind of go, yeah, but things aren't lining up. What is true isn't in my life isn't true. Like prayer doesn't work. I've been praying all my life, and the averages of how prayers get answered, right? If you ask for it and you get it, God heard my prayer. Praise
That's
the Lord.
right.
But if you prayed for it and you didn't get it, well, God must have known better and he has something better for you. So he said no. Or the devil's resisting you. You got to pray harder with more faith. There's always
Yeah.
this
It's
circular
always your fault
reasoning.
for some
Yeah,
reason why it didn't
always.
work.
Oh,
You
yeah,
didn't have enough
always.
faith. You have secret sin in your life. Have you ever heard George Carlin's bit, the comedy bit on religion?
I have. I can't recall it, but
Oh,
yes.
it is one of the absolute best. What he basically says, well, if God has this divine will and every chump with a $2 prayer book can fuck up his divine plan, which we can't, what kind of God is he? If he
Right.
has this divine plan set in motion, it can't change. Then you come along and want to change it. Why would he change it for you?
Right.
And he talks about also how God, never answered his prayers. So he stopped praying to God, and he talks about how he started praying to Joe Pesci. Because he
Yes.
seems like a guy who can get shit done. And he goes, you can't imagine what you can accomplish with a simple baseball bat.
Yes.
So he's like talking about praying his neighbor's dog will stop, and God didn't answer. So he called Joe Pesci and he showed up with a bat,
Yeah.
and hey, the
Yeah.
dog stopped barking. But, that's comedy. But, I think there's truth. And then there's
Yeah.
what we're taught we're supposed to think and believe about truth.
Yeah.
That's my experience, at least.
Yeah.
Like there's what is, and then there's these different versions we're taught on how to perceive and interpret it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we get a lot of problems, and obviously different religions and uh, things like that. To
Yeah.
answer your
If God,
question,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, please.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, if God created, if this is, if the Bible was true, it's not, but if it was, then Adam and Eve, we would have been more civilized and had all of the correct morals in the beginning. And then over time, they would have fallen apart. That's how things work. It's like your house is clean when you get it all done, and then it gets dirty over time. But in nature, things start out kind of messy, and then as you learn and grow, you become more civilized. So clearly, just those two paths, obviously, it's just nature. We started out barbaric. The Bible's even barbaric because the people that wrote it were barbaric, and we have become more civilized. That's why slavery was so supported in the Bible and totally condoned in the Bible.
Yeah.
And then later we realized as humans, oh wait, no, like that's not good. That if God really was the moral ruler, then that would have been set forth from the beginning. And God would have said, hey, listen, by the way, it's not demon possession, it's epilepsy. It's not disease, it's germs. It's, but that's not how it all played out. And clearly it played out nature, not some God ordained, he set it up with the rules, and there would only be one religion. There would be one true religion from the foundations of the world. But that's not what we see. We see some 10,000 religions. And clearly it's just so clear. I honestly, Brian, there are times, I can't believe I ever believed it for as long as I believed it. And now sometimes I look at people and I hear them talk and I think to myself, how in the world do you actually believe this to be true in the face of overwhelming evidence that it's not true?
Yeah, it's like we have blinders on like a horse, and it's like we're just led along by this narrative. And I often equate it to like the Matrix, the movie The Matrix.
Yeah.
Because I remember being in it. It's like I didn't know. It's sort of like I didn't know I was in a Matrix until I got out.
Right.
And then you go, wait a minute, there is a Matrix.
Yes.
And it's sort of like, there's that Bible verse that says, don't forsake the gathering together. Whenever you miss a Sunday, that's what everyone starts texting you. And
yes.
Yeah, hey, where you? Don't, you haven't been to church in a month. Like, don't forsake the gathering together, But it's like, if you get away a little bit, you step back, you start seeing the cracks in the walls. You start seeing the things they don't want you to see. And there's a reason that's doctrinally in there or whatever. I think that's the big reason. Is because they know if you get away from it, you'll see everything else that exists. It's like how I see apologetics. Apologetics to me is like this hill that Christianity built. And now they have to defend this hill. And it's not really defensible. And they think it's the only highest point in existence. But like with those blinders on, they don't realize that hill is surrounded by a mountain range way higher, different mountain ranges. But to them, it's like it's this only thing. It's this tunnel vision, and they brag about it. Narrow-minded, yeah. And they put it on a Christian keychain that you buy at the Christian bookstore. It's like, I'm narrow-minded. Narrow is the gate, and few are the... Right. Isn't it funny how like there's only a few people who make it to heaven, and it's always the person bragging about it? It's never like they're not included.
Yeah.
I saw a meme the other day. I had like a door to heaven, a door to hell. And the door to hell, had like the long line, with all the people enjoying their life. And then the door to heaven had 4 people. And I'm like, they might have been in your group actually. And I was like, why is it that like everyone thinks they're one of these 4 people?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
not, it's never like, I'm not going to be the Christian where God says, I never knew you. Like they
Right.
conveniently just kind of look past that one. Of course,
Right.
that's Revelation, which that's controversial in its own right, that book. But yeah.
Any God that people talk about, when clearly they got the right one. I mean, that's, clearly when they're talking about God, they're talking about the one true God, and everybody feels that way no matter what version of that God that there is. And that's the other thing that I noticed when I was a Christian. There were just certain things that just didn't make sense, right? Like, sick, suffering children, there's certain things that just didn't. I always struggled and had to do those mental gymnastics to try to make sense of it. And then when I started moving away from Christianity, and then eventually when I think I first said I was spiritual, not religious. And then I kind of was like, I'm agnostic. And then I was like, you know what? I think I'm probably atheist because I definitely don't see any evidence for a God. When I finally understood what atheism was and had the correct interpretation, not what Christians were saying it was. You're saying there is no God. No. I'm not saying there is no God. I'm just saying there's no evidence that this God exists. But
especially that version.
Sense. Exactly. Yeah, that God's cruel. Like if that God does exist, yeah, I don't want any part of that God for sure.
Yeah,
but
especially for eternity. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for no way. But then when I stepped outside, much like back to that Truman Show idea, things don't make sense, right? Like, why is a stage light falling out of the sky on the beach? Like, Truman was like, what is this? Well, things don't make sense. Well, then, like, it only rained on him and he would have to move around to try to get out of the rain. Things weren't making sense. That's because you're just in this little bubble and you've tried to create this world around this whole idea. Of course, it doesn't make sense. It's just a little subgroup within a larger world. And of course it doesn't make sense because it's not true. And like you said in the beginning, when we started here, truth, something that's true, you can dig into it and it'll still be true. Like you dig into it, the more questions, the more you are critical of it, it proves itself to be true. But when you do that in Christianity, like with a real open, honest, intellectual honesty, it just falls apart completely. And you have to end up just, la, 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 don't look over there. Don't look over there. Cause that doesn't make sense in my world. So I'm going to live in this little small world that makes me feel comfortable, makes me feel like, okay, when I die, I don't actually die. I live forever, though there's zero evidence for that whatsoever. And I'm not here, I'd say this a lot. I'm not here to say that there is no afterlife. I don't know if there's an afterlife. Now, when I was a Christian, I did know. I was 100% certain there was a heaven and there was a hell.
You're supposed to know and be 100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. There were streets of gold. I had a mansion, obviously.
Well, you didn't want to be like doubting Thomas because the only honest guy in the Bible is vilified for doubting.
Absolutely.
Which is actually a very intelligent thing to do, but I digress.
Yeah, me too. So back to what was the final straw which made you cross that bridge from Christian to probably agnostic or atheist?
Yeah, I'd say right now I'm an open-minded agnostic. To claim I'm an atheist would, to me, kind of be like, well, I know there's not, like it's that argument, I've been all around the universe and I have full knowledge and I can tell you with certainty that he's not there. Like, I don't know that.
Sure.
So, and I've always thought, even as a Christian, I thought the most honest people I knew were agnostics. They're just like, I don't know, but I'm open to it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm open to the evidence. Like,
show it to me.
If God's going to send me to hell for like wondering, I guess he's kind of a dick. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
For me, one of there's a few things, but I remember sitting in church, man, it was probably 3.5, 4 years ago when I still lived in Texas. And my 13-year-old son at the time was sitting next to me in the service. And I was hearing the words of the preacher of the lesson, but there was like a communication I was hearing, kind of like an underground river. I was hearing just inside me, not audibly, but in my mind, I was hearing like the real message being delivered that it seemed like people don't realize they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are certain Bible stories that the underlying message is like, you're a natural born piece of shit. and you deserve hell, even though you didn't make you. God made you the way you are, but it's your fault. Like that kind of stuff. And I remember looking over at my son and thinking, and this is like halfway through the service, I hope he's not paying attention. I was hoping my son was not paying attention in church.
Interesting.
And then I thought, well, why the fuck are we here if I'm hoping my son isn't paying attention? And I was bored as shit too, because I always was. I hated the first 40 minutes of every church service, by the way.
Yeah.
The music sucks. Sorry, church, not sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I grew up on classic rock and I just had like this extremely high standard that was drilled into me. Like, if you're not like Jimmy Page, you know, if you're not doing Led Zeppelin, you can't play like that. Sit down, bro. Like, I know I'm being an asshole, but
you loved my church, bro. We had kicking music.
Oh, did you?
Like, we really did. Like, we had a bunch of rock stars up there, and we would open up on like "Living on a Prayer" by John Bon Jovi. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No. So I mean, the music was just always annoying to me, but it was that point where I was hoping my son wasn't paying attention, because now I look back and go, there's so much he will not have to deconstruct from. Like, I had 37 years of that to like undo. And so there was that, and not only that, but it was the fact that it's not bad to have a standard to try to live up to. It's not.
Sure.
But Christianity is an impossible religion. No, nobody can and nobody does live up to it. And, you know,
just look at the news.
Look at the news, you know, the whole Robert Morris thing, which I think he has a trial coming up this week or next.
Yes, he does.
You know, and like after like going to so many churches, and I mean, people outside the church think they see hypocrisy. It's like, have you ever worked for a church? Have you ever, you know, I learned I had to contract work with churches because you couldn't just take their word for it.
Right.
It's like I have to treat them like my corporate speaking clients, because, I don't know, I might drive all the way from Fort Worth, Texas to El Paso, 11 and a half hours one way, and the pastor's going to stiff me on the honorarium. That happened on Veterans Day.
Really?
Years back. Completely played stupid. Going to take an offering. And I'm like looking at my wife at the end of the service. They didn't take an offering. You know, then they had a barbecue brisket afterwards. So my book sales tanked because, you know, if there's food afterwards, your sales go down the tube. So, you know, things like that. But yeah, man, like, it's just like the more you get to know, it's like nobody's living it. And even if they're trying, they're just not. I mean, they're living together, living in sin. They're on the worship team. This one is evading their taxes. This one's a convicted felon. They stole a bunch of money from their company, but praise Jesus. You know, what are you doing with your life that ain't right? He said that, you know, he said Jesus Christ when he stubbed his toe. You know, it's like, oh boy, you know, it's so bad. You know, I didn't go to fucking jail for that though.
Yeah.
You know, like some people, and I won't name any of these people, but I know these are people I'm talking about who I know. It's like, and they're all just the Jesus facade, the Jesus wrapping paper, but behind it all, it's just bullshit. Like, you would be better off just telling the truth. Like, hey, I'm a married guy, and I'm married, and I'm living with a lady who's also married, but to someone else, and we're fornicating and committing adultery, and did that for a few years while I was on the worship team. But, you know, they just kind of fail to mention that, you know, but then like, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear so-and-so's bisexual? It's like, at least they're fucking honest about it, you know? You know, and you can see my t-shirt, Organized Religion Stole My Foreskin. What's with that? God demands foreskins. Kind of weird. I've been to war and never did I get any inclination to go, you know, cut off foreskins of Taliban. I'm just like, hey, we dealt with them. They're done. What's the obsession with foreskins? Kind of weird. Cultural context. You know, I'm like, that's perverted. I don't care. Like, that's weird. You know, we can, you know, so there's so many things, but it's just so weird. And it's like, is this the best we can come up with? And then you get the politics in it and money and forget truth. It was just like the whole COVID thing. Once money and politics got in it, forget what the truth is. You're not going to see it. There's agendas now. And it's always been the same thing with religion. And throughout the centuries, different countries, politics, regimes, And, even the Muslims are just as certain that they're right as an evangelical Christian thinks they're right.
Absolutely.
And they will die on that hill. And so
Yeah.
will a lot of Christians. And it's like, you can't both be right. It's like, again, George Carlin said, someone's going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, so it's like nobody has any idea. And it's like, can't we just say we don't know?
Yeah.
Like, here's what I think. Here's what I understand. Like, this is me. Like, my current level of understanding is this, but I'm not going to disagree with something without seeing how it makes sense or it resolves. And that's the journey I'm on. I don't know if I'll ever truly find it all. I don't think anyone ever does. And I'm actually okay with that. I've never been less afraid of not knowing. I'm at peace.
Yeah.
Because I'm just what I am, and I didn't make me, as far as I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a debate. I think it might have been Christopher Hitchens. And this was an interesting debate because Christopher Hitchens was just brilliant. Missed that dude. But he was debating a Muslim, a Christian, and a rabbi. And here's what I found was so interesting. Christopher Hitchens says, I'm supposed to be debating these three gentlemen, yet all three of these gentlemen don't agree. The Christian thinks that both the rabbi and the Muslim are going to be going to hell. The Muslim thinks that the Jewish person and the Christian and the atheist is going to hell. And then no one up here agrees on anything. They all three are religious and believe in a God, but they all believe in a different God or a different version of God, and they interpret it all completely different. It was a strange debate because he won basically with his opening statement that, guys, it's not like I'm debating. It's not like me against three Christians. Yeah. This is me against three different gods, and what they believe are not compatible. And therefore they're clearly none of them are true. If the Muslim's right, then, Craig Lane got whatever his name is, he's going to hell. And then Denosh, that guy's going to hell. And then that guy, they're all going to hell. And it's just, when you step back and just, I've said this before, it's like when you're a Christian, you have on these goggles and you got to look at everything through these goggles of a predetermined belief that everything that I believe is true. And then you look at life and you try to interpret it through that lens. Every different religion is doing that same thing, and each of the lenses that they're wearing are different colors. Yep. And so they don't all agree either. But Christians but theirs is the one true. Like, that's, you and I were raised that way. Like, I would make,
if we were raised in the Middle East, Islam would have told us the same thing.
Exactly.
And if you've ever heard Islamic apologists talk in defense of the Islamic faith, they say the same dumb shit that Christian apologists say. It's almost like if you didn't know they were Muslim, you would think they were Christians.
Right.
They're just citing different verses or different books of a different holy book, but they have a lot of the same harebrained, non-resolving ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people try to say, well, all religions lead to the same place. No, they do not. No, they don't. They don't lead. Not all religions lead to the same place. I used to even say that, I used to say, I feel like it's like a mountain, and the Muslims are crawling up this side and the Jews are crawling up this side, and then the Christians are crawling up this side. And then they're all going to get to the top and be like, yo, what's up? It's like, no, they're all on different mountains.
That's a good way to put it.
Completely on different mountains. And when they get to the top, they're going to find out it ain't nothing like what we thought. And I'm like you. I am atheist because I don't see any evidence specifically for the Bible God. I see no evidence for the Bible God. That's why I call myself atheist. Is there some supreme being out there? How the hell am I supposed to know? How the hell can anybody know when people say, well, I know what happens after death? No, you don't.
No,
you don't. And
you've been taught to think. You've been taught to think, is the problem.
Absolutely. And when people talk about the near-death experiences, which I did a video on that, it comes out later, because someone says, well, what do you think about the near-death experiences? I'm like, think about it. Hindus, when they have a near-death experience, it's within that religious belief. When Christians have a near-death experience, they always see Jesus. And when it's a, it's like whoever has the near death experience, their experience completely aligns with what they had been taught, whether they believe it or not. People say, well, I wasn't I was an atheist when I had that near death experience and I saw Jesus. Okay, well, I'm just curious, how were you raised? Well, I went to Catholic school, and you're like, of
Yeah.
course.
So
You
the
know?
idea of God planted in your mind was this one,
Absolutely.
and that was
Absolutely.
your experience. Now, in my whole thought is kind of like, when someone says, "Do you believe in God?" It's like, I'm not trying to do the politician thing, but it's like, well, what do you mean by God? Because I've lived all over the world, and if you go to India or Iraq or Afghanistan or Chattanooga, Tennessee, they all have different ideas of what you mean by God. If you're in America and you
Absolutely.
say, "Do you believe in God?" most people just assume immediately you're talking about the Christian God.
Right.
Now, I don't know, when I think about the concept of God, the biggest thing I can like reduce it or deduce it down to in my mind at this point is, I, for me, I just sort of refer to it as like the source of everything, like wherever all this came from. Like, is God the energy that makes up consciousness and existence and matter and energy? And that, like, is God just the whatever source that it started from, if it did ever have a start? Um, that's like the most honest thought at this point I can come up with, is that, well, is God in everything? Is he in my blood cells, to the oxygen molecules, to the threads in this shirt, on a macro and a micro level, and into the quantum string theory level of
Yeah.
how small things can get? It's like, well, if it's like talking about God, it's like, I don't see how, quote, God could not be in everything, if in fact, if it is that, let's say, energy makes up everything, like
Right.
scientifically speaking. I'm not a scientist, but basically, matter and energy, makes up existence. It's like, even our thoughts have energy, I'm told.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not an expert, but even our thoughts have energy. So it's like, to me, I'm just kind of at the wall at the end, like the Truman Show. He bumps into the sky and it's solid.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, I think, I don't know how it could be anything or more than or different, even though I'm open to the fact it could be, and I lack understanding. But how is God not just, quote, the source of everything?
Right.
To me, that makes the most sense. Now, what form does that take on? I don't know if it takes on a personality, like a personal relationship with
Right.
Jesus. Like, okay, like there's that idea, but then there's like, well, God is everything. Well, I'm not talking traditional polytheism, but if every molecule that exists because God made it, maybe those are all pieces of God and God is the whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, it's like, what was I was about to say? Some people say, like, I'm not very spiritual, or I'm religious. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Well, it's like some other people say, oh, they're not Christian anymore. They're not spiritual. I don't know how anything in existence could lack spirituality.
Right.
It's like, it's almost like you don't choose to be spiritual. Like, you are, like, you exist, man.
Yeah.
Like, at
Yeah.
least my understanding, it's like, how could anything not be spiritual by our understanding and definition generally of what we mean by spiritual?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot of wildness to, even the fact that I'm having this conversation with you. You're understanding me, I'm understanding you. And I also have this other piece of me that's saying, oh, ask him about this, or think about this, or, oh, my dog just made a noise over here. And, like, all these things are going on at the same time while we're having a conversation. I mean, there's definitely some, things that we just don't freaking know, and can't really even understand. Just like in the last 100 years, how far we've come. I heard someone say, if one of our badass stealth jets would have, if you could transport that back 500 years, that would have been a UFO with
Yeah.
aliens, that if that had gone flying over someplace, I mean, that would just be crazy.
Mm.
But, we know what that is now. And so I think, we're just so limited in our understanding. and I think religion is clear. I mean, clearly man-made. It has all the signs of being man-made.
100%.
Um, and with that, as we continue to evolve, and we're able to give answers to so many things that we weren't able to give answers to, like germ theory and epilepsy and different things, where
Mm.
okay, it's not demon possession, there's a issue here. Well, religion was created in a time when people didn't know. They didn't know there were other galaxies out there. They had no idea about any of that stuff.
Well, they
And
thought
so
thunder and
to
lightning
make
was
it up.
God getting angry and,
Exactly.
and punishing them,
Well,
when
especially
it's
like you said, sickness and disease. I mean, that
yeah.
100%. It's either the devil, trying to get you, it's God trying to test you, or there's sin in your life.
Yeah, one of the wildest examples of that was, and this is something my wife has to really deal with because we've deconstructed together, conveniently around the same
That's
time.
wonderful, man.
We're on the same page. I know a lot of people are not, but um, she had years of childhood sexual trauma,
Oh,
and from the time she was 3 or 4, and when she was in her late teens, she was taken into a separate prayer room for people to pray for her. And, it was the typical, what sin do you have in your life? Because you're not healed, all that shit. And they, I'm not saying this is every church, but they're basically all on the same page in general. And, these people in particular told her she was, the reason she's not healed is because she's demon possessed.
oh,
Now, no, she wasn't demon possessed. She was traumatized
right.
for like 10 years by her uncles, like really fucked up stuff. And it's like the whole putting it back on the person, the victim blaming. It's like, just say your shit doesn't work, man. Like, I don't know. Like, we're told this works, but clearly it
It
doesn't,
doesn't.
you know? Um, and that's actually one question she wanted me to ask you,
Yeah.
about if you have if you can relate to this, how you dealt with it. Because that experience has produced a lot of anger in her deconstruction, you
Yeah.
know, and deconstructing is kind of like, going through like trauma phases. There's like different phases of getting past things, and anger is one of the, I forget what it's called, the stages of grief or
Yep.
something.
Yep. Yep.
And anger at the church for that kind of thing, and how it made her see herself
Mm.
and her self-image and everything. I mean, she was born in the AG. Granddaddy was a AG preacher. I mean, she was like, she came out born and they fucking hooked her right up to the Matrix. Never had a chance until
Yeah.
she did,
Yeah.
37 years later. But her question was, did you ever feel anger in your deconstruction journey? And how in the world were you able to get past it if you did? Because she's
Yeah.
still looking for that.
Yeah. Dude, that's a great question. And yes, I was very angry and pretty bitter at being duped, telling me that these things were true and that this would work and this, all the stuff. I did go through I would say for about a year. And thankfully I didn't start my YouTube channel during that time because I was just so angry and snarky and
Yeah.
hateful. I mean, I was just definitely like, now I mock and I do different things, but it's coming from and people see that it's coming from a different Christians think I'm still angry, but I'm not,
Well, if
but
you
people
disagree
think
with them, you're wrong. So whatever, right?
exactly. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But yes, I really did have to deal with that. And I went to therapy and part of my journey was finally, I just realized I just had to start relearning and unwinding all of that toxicity and realizing, I was born into this. Much like your wife, I was born in church. My mom was a church pianist. My dad was the worship leader, and they also traveled around and did music at small little Assembly of God churches. And that was my life, So I would travel every Sunday. We would drive to some little town here in Kansas, around Kansas City, or Missouri. And, my mom and dad would get up there and do the songs and do the testimony. And then the pastor would get up there and do an altar call. And that was just my life, all I ever knew. And then much like you, when I started just thinking, I don't know about this, like this, they're telling me this, but my experience is this, like, it's not lining up here. And you just, like you said, you just bury it, and they give you more quippy little answers that aren't answers at all. The
Yeah.
mysteries belongeth to the Lord, and one day we'll know in full. Only now we know in part. And, all those stupid things that I used to say from the pulpit. We look through a glass.
We all did
Gibson,
it.
And
we were all programmed to say it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them still are, which it's hard for me. I have to remember to be graceful, because I remember I used to be one, and I didn't see it until I saw it. But man, people like how I used to be can be annoying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which that's saying something about me. If like a version of me is annoying to me, I'm like, I'm not above that. I'm like, I can look at that honestly.
Yeah. And I don't know what's up. I don't know. Everybody's mind's a little different. I just got to a place in my life where it just became so clear to me, this isn't true. Everything I was taught as it relates to Jesus and the Bible and all that stuff, it's just empirically false. There is no hell to shun. There is no heaven to gain. There is no God answering my prayers. And, everything that's happened to me in my life, good, bad, indifferent, is just a part of life for so many different reasons. And I just had to let it go, to use that cheesy line. I just finally just said, you know what? I'm letting all this go, and I'm going to really start pursuing truth, like things that are empirically, testably, provably true. And the more I discovered truth, all of a sudden, the more life began to make sense to me, and the clearer things became. And this is what shocks Christians. And I know it does, because I was one, and I know what they think about people like us. And my life's better now.
Way better.
Yeah, way better. My emotional health
100%.
is better. I just don't deal with many of the same things that I dealt with, the guilt and the shame and the condemnation. We're born broken and flawed, and then commanded to be well. And then, like you said, I always felt like an imposter, even though for the most part, like, I'm still the same guy, in the sense of I was always a good dude. I have a lot of good friends that I've had for years and years and years. I have good relationships with family, and, I was a good dude, and I struggled though. I just struggled with some of the simple things, right? Thinking, can't touch yourself, that's a sin. And yet, I would do it like every other person on the planet.
Every other person who's ever lived ever. And God, and apparently God made it so appealing so he could blame us for doing it.
It's just nuts.
It's like, well, how is this not his fault?
Right.
I'm like, on my YouTube channel, I have this video about free will, and I had this discussion where I call it the God and Ford argument. I've owned a few Ford Mustangs in my time. They've been great. But I said, okay, yeah, they're great, man.
Yeah.
Now, if it messes up, if it has to be recalled, let's say at 60,000 miles, is that the car's fault, or is it a manufacturer defect? And it's the manufacturer's fault, because the car didn't make itself. So clearly, and so if we're born into sin, which that's interesting. Like, we have free will to sin or not sin, and we're guilty, but we're also born into sin, a sin nature. Did you know nothing can operate or live or exist outside its own said nature? Zebras have stripes, cats meow, dogs bark. Like, things have a nature.
Yeah.
And that's another point. I haven't looked real deep into it, but free will and original sin have a big conflict of interest. They conflict with one another. Because you can teach, we sin because we choose. Yet we're told, from the Bible, we're told in Christianity that we have original sin, natural born sin. We're born into sin, which means we can't not do it.
Right.
So it's not that we choose. It's like we literally can't. Like, it's in us. Like, as much as my blood cells are in my body, so is that.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, how are we on the hook for that if the person who made us, or the person, the thing, whatever God that made us, how is it our fault for being made the way that God made us?
Right.
I mean, it's just, it could go way deeper than that, but but that doesn't resolve. Like,
Yeah.
and those are two things they teach, and it's like they clash. Like they can't coexist.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. The Bible, as you know, I mean, it's full of contradictory
Yeah.
ideas, conflicting
There's
in
not one
pairs.
contradiction in this holy, perfect Bible. It's the word of God. It's perfect. God's breathed, which it doesn't even mean what we were taught, by the way. I learned from a Bible scholar. God breathed. It actually isn't what at least evangelicals teach God breathed to mean, but
Yeah.
that's another discussion.
Yeah. So back to the
Yeah.
final straw for you. Like, give me some of the actual theological truths that, the 17 fundamental truths of the Assemblies of God. Like, what were some of the things that you just started clicking away? Like, Jesus is the only way. Like, what started falling away for you to the point where you actually got to that day where you said, and you looked at your wife and you said, I don't think I'm Christian.
Yeah, and that was a weird thing to say, and my wife actually said that the other day for the first time. She goes, "I've never said that before," but like we have these little waypoints along our journey where you go, "I never said that. I've never claimed that. I've never, But for me, to answer your question, it was like once I investigated one thing, and it's like that's clearly bullshit. Then it's not that I wanted other things to be, but I would look into other things. And it's like, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense either. Like, I mean, think about this. I posted this in your deconstruction group on Facebook the other day. The idea of hell, the Christian idea of hell is eternal conscious torment. Well, there's a few ideas, but that's the big one.
Yeah.
And evangelicals really want that one to be true because they have the love of Jesus in their hearts. And like I'm not mocking them. I'm saying what they really believe, like on both ends.
Yeah.
And I used to be one of them. But like, how can it be, let's say, eternal conscious torment and fire forever when Christianity has roots in the Jewish faith?
Right.
Like, I don't even qualify to go to hell in the Jewish faith because I'm not Jewish.
Right.
And I heard that from a rabbi. It's like you can't go to hell in the Jewish faith because you're not Jewish.
Right.
I'm like, score, okay, So, but it's like but it's the same God. The Old Testament, New Testament, it's the same one God. Why does God currently have multiple versions of hell and claiming they're different but both equally valid? Clearly, that can't be the case. And if Christianity's version of hell is real, how in the world did they? I'm not talking about, I don't know church history and where these ideas come from, like in the Greco-Roman periods and all that. I do, but I would ask a Christian, how did they make the jump from hell being like this finite place? You might go there for a year till you figure out how bad you were, and then you ascend.
Right.
And only if you're Jewish, to everyone's going to hell, and it's forever. And it's like, it's the same God that said both. Yeah. Now you can call them different names. It's the same God. It's the same God. So like that's another thing. It doesn't reconcile. It doesn't resolve. I mean, there's so many things I could point at. And it's funny when I say each of these things, automatically I hear the Christian rebuttal, the apologetic response in my head. Like, like for all these things, like, oh, the Robert Morris thing. Like I used to go to his church, and it's like, he always used to talk about, and remind me of the Jordan Peterson thing you wanted to ask me about.
Yeah.
But Robert Morris, I remember him saying only maybe a few times throughout the years I went there in his sermons, he would reflect back on like, I'm not perfect. There was a time when I had a moral indiscretion with a younger woman, and
she was 12.
Yeah. and it's like people would go, oh, he's being so honest. He's being so honest and like, hey, like I did this thing. But like to your point, he just failed to mention that the younger woman was a fucking 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay. You just like, you look at that too, and it's like nobody's living it. Right. And but then the Christians say, oh well, you can't hold anyone up to the light of God. You can't blame, put your trust in man. It's like, oh, the church isn't a building, it's the people. Well, and then when something like this happens, well, you can't trust the people. It's like whatever circular argument, like that's the thing about apologetics. That was another big thing. They show up to a debate or a discussion already knowing they can't be wrong.
Right.
And that's why, like, I'm at a point, I hardly even talk to him at this point or even discuss it, because if you are an evangelical, especially, but if you're an apologist or you're wanting to use apologetics to affirm your faith, you're showing up to the conversation already thinking you're right, and you have this deep desire to prove you're right, no matter how batshit crazy you sound or have to come up with something. Like William Lane Craig, killing the babies was a blessing to the babies because they didn't go to hell. They just hacked them to pieces, with machetes. But hey, it was a blessing to the babies. I mean, shit like that. And it's like I like having honest questions that discussions where we search for truth no matter where it leads.
Yeah.
You can't do that with a Christian because they already have this built-in.
They've already dug out the rut for the water to flow this way.
Yeah, it's like they have to be right, because what if they weren't? Number one, I understand that can be a very scary thing for people. I get it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm more of an explorer type, so I'll follow it wherever it goes, and I'm not afraid of whatever the hell I find. I'd rather have the ugly truth and see it than a comfortable lie and just feel cozy about. Like, that's just me.
Yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely.
with the apologetics though, it's like there's all these just pre-made arguments that are folded up and handed to you to use, and it's always the same ones. And they say the same thing about people who don't agree with them. It's always the same 12. I heard Ravi Zacharias say that when he was an apologist. Oh, with atheists, it's always the same 12 or 13 questions. Then he died, and turns out a bunch of women came out and said he was sexually abusing them. I'm like, wow, imagine that. Like, the day after he dies, boom, like everybody. So then there's that, and like that was a guy I really looked up to, and he was brilliant, but he was kind of a piece of shit.
Yep.
with doing that. And you didn't just live an honest life. I'd rather be honest and be like, I don't know, but here's what I think, than to be going around saying, I know that Nicole C. Mullins song, nothing against her. I know my Redeemer lives. I know that I know. No, you fucking don't.
Yeah.
You don't. You've been taught to think and it's okay you don't know.
Yeah.
But when you make that claim, it's like planting that flag on that hill I talked about. Now you have to defend the hill. Yeah. And your ego doesn't want to allow you to be wrong. And so you have to say anything and everything, negotiate the text, reinterpret it, make it say something it doesn't. Basically what people have been doing forever with the Bible.
Yep.
And it's just like it's nuts.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, what was like the final nail in the coffin? All of that and then some. And it's just never ending. It's like, just give it a few days, there'll be something else and another excuse made for it. And whenever like people are abused in the church, you have sexual abuse that goes on, things like that. You ever notice how the church system always protects itself, but never the victim?
Yep.
That was like the Robert Morris case. I watched the service where they talked about that after he got put out. They mentioned that lady's name once for about maybe 20 seconds of the whole hour and a half service, and swept it under the rug. And all they talked about was how we are going to heal from this. Well, what about her? What about the victim? Because they can't. Well, they go, well, don't tell anybody because it'll make Jesus look bad. And then they could go to hell because you told about what I did to you. And then people don't want to tell because they think they're sending people to hell. This deep manipulation. But yeah, like that whole service, I remember watching it thinking, this is the biggest load of shit I've ever watched. Yep. They're not owning anything. They're in protection mode. They're in reputation management mode when they just need to come out and go, this is completely fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. A pastor needs to get up and say the F word, go, this is totally fucked. We don't stand for this. He's out of here. That will not happen. If I find out that happens, we're having police come in here immediately. And I mean, that's what you do if you find out children are being molested in your church,
Right.
that's the kind of stand you take because you're supposed to.
Right.
Not playing reputation management and, well, this and that, and we're gonna all heal from this. You people have nothing to heal from.
Right.
Yeah, and this is like a small summary of my Facebook post, which was paragraphs long, just blasting Gateway Church and Robert Morris. And I've never done that before, and I don't do that lightly. I'm not one to just jump out there and throw stuff out there. That kind of thing, though, I know enough people. I've never been through it. I know enough people who have been through that kind of abuse where it's like that you don't just sit by quietly. You don't make excuses for it. Like you own that shit, you make it right as you possibly ever could. But when they went into reputation management mode and just sweep under the rug and we're all going to heal from this, it's like, forget you people. And it's a repeatable pattern you see throughout the church. This is the way it always goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a pastor. I've seen it. I've have pastor friends that have gone through scandals. I knew Ted Haggart in Colorado Springs, the one that was, preaching against homosexuality, yet he was.
I used to go to that church too.
Oh, really? Yeah, New Life Church.
Man, I should go to other churches, get them shut down, man. Get caught. I go to a church and suddenly a pastor gets caught in a scandal, man.
Oh man, it's crazy.
It's my ministry.
Yeah, it's just absolutely wild, some of those things. All right, so let me shift gears. Did you get a chance to watch the which was labeled, the video was labeled Christian Jordan Peterson, or Christian debates, 20 atheists. They later changed it to, Jordan Peterson debates atheist. And then everybody's seen the clip of the one guy that says, so you're a Christian, to Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson's like, no, I never said that. And he's like, well, am I in the wrong debate? He's like, I'm atheist. You're supposed to be on the other side. What are we doing here? And that one went viral. Everybody has seen that one in this space. So I couldn't stomach the whole debate. I watched parts of it and it was just frustrating. His word salad, him hawing around, and he just seemed so unhappy, or he had really bad gas or something. Like, I don't know what was going on with his face, but he was just so miserable looking and angry. And like you said, defensive. His ego was just getting destroyed. What was your take on that debate?
Yeah, it was a few things. First, I think, well, one of the younger guys that was, in honesty, just being a dick. He wasn't there for a debate. One of the younger guys was just up there trying to fire. He got his 15 minutes of fame. I saw him do a video afterwards about the email he got saying they were told, this will be 20 atheists, versus one debate, one Christian. So I understand they did come into it with that. I don't know if Jubilee or whatever the channel is that makes those, they're kind of known. There's kind of a reputation out there for them, like trying to orchestrate things that go viral.
Right.
So I can see there being some things where some things don't line up and it causes friction in the debate in order to make things like that, those clips. I also think, one thing that's interesting, I used to really enjoy watching Jordan Peterson's stuff.
Me
I mean,
too.
he's obviously a brilliant guy. He's very intelligent. His book, 12 Rules for Life, I mean, it's a great book. It's like one of the best sellers, I think, on the planet ever.
Yeah.
I know I do, and I'm not saying this with any intent, but I did notice the past few years he started exploring the Bible more and Christianity. He seemed to be getting a lot more illogical and more emotional and defensive and angry as he did that. Now, I don't know all the reasons for that, and I'm not blasting the guy for it.
Sure.
I'm just saying I noticed a difference as I was listening to him. I noticed a difference of how he it seems as if he changed.
Yeah.
In my estimation, that wasn't really for the better. Yeah. And if he was standing right here, I'd be telling him also, it just seems like you changed once you went the Bible route, kind of exploring. It seems like he sort of changed somewhere
Yeah.
and got more defensive and overly maybe more emotional and things. Not that it's a bad thing. I guess I don't really understand why. I'm not saying it's because he started going more the Christian route, even though he doesn't say he's a Christian.
Right.
And like I'm not saying that that's the reason. It
Yeah.
just seems as if the more he's migrated towards that, the little more it seems, I guess, intellectually unhinged. It kind of seems like he is becoming. And who am
Yeah.
I? I mean, who am I to
Sure.
even?
I
That
get.
guy's way more brilliant than me. And
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing. I'm just observing from my perspective because I really enjoy learning from the guy. He's had a lot of good things to say in the past.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, why he didn't want to answer a lot of questions and got so defensive and face red, angry. Um, I don't know. Like when I think of a debate, like I like two people to come together. I'll tell you one of my favorite people to listen to talk and watch and debate is Alex O'Connor.
Oh, I love
The
Alex.
British kid, he's like what 25, 26.
Yeah.
He like graduated
He's
from Oxford
brilliant.
with like a theology degree, and like
Yeah.
he's brilliant. One of the things I noticed, and I want to be more like him in a sense, in
Yeah.
this sense that he's so respectful. In all cases, he's very intelligent, but he approaches it respectfully.
Yeah.
And that's how we really get the truth out of each other and everything. I think is when you don't have an ego pitted against an ego.
Right.
He seems more like an explorer, and he's asking honestly, but he's also going to ask hard questions if something doesn't make sense. I really like that, and like with the Jordan Peterson thing, it was like the opposite. In fact, I think he's interviewed Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole Jordan Peterson debate thing. I think a lot of it was kind of rigged and set up, but in a way to create such a thing.
Did you feel
But
like Jordan Peterson didn't do a good job? Because I felt like he just didn't do a good job. I don't think it looked good on him.
Yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing. It was hard. I watched some pieces. It just didn't seem like anything was being said.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, well, where's this? Why am I like wasting my time? Like, where are we even talking about? Like, where's this? And so, not to say it was only him. I think it was both sides and probably the production company too. But yeah, that really didn't go well. It didn't seem. And I don't know. I wish I could know why he's gotten a lot more, I guess, emotionally combative when having discussions.
Yeah.
It seems like he didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
And I think I took more away from it when it was.
Yeah, because I'm like you. I enjoy a good debate. I love Christopher Hitchens in any debate. Like Richard Dawkins says, if you get an opportunity to debate Christopher Hitchens, decline. He was just so brilliant.
Yeah,
and I like the way one person gives their opening statement, and then the other person gives their opening statement, and then they kind of start going through the different things. I've always thought, especially now, all questions are good questions. I mean, if I don't know, then I should be free to ask you for clarification. I saw another debate where I think it was Sam Harris was debating Jordan Peterson or having a conversation with him. I don't know what they called it, a debate. And Sam Harris asked him directly, do you think that Jesus resurrected from the dead and is coming back? And Jordan Peterson said, well, it'd take me 40 minutes to answer that question. And I'm like, how's that going to take 40 minutes? It's either yes or no. And then you can explain why you answered it that way. But it shouldn't take 40 minutes to answer a yes or no question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I ask you a direct, are you a Christian? You're either not or you are. And then once you give me your answer, then you can explain like what kind of Christian you are or what kind of non-Christian you are. Yeah. I just found it was just so disconcerting and disingenuous. And I heard someone say this, it was, we talk about intellectual honesty. I heard that a lot of people are talking about that debate saying it was a dishonest, intellectual, like he wasn't honest in just answering questions and giving clarity. It was like he was constantly in defense mode, just being super defensive, not answering questions, being very like politician like, where just going all over the place and saying
Answer
things.
the question with a question.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Interrupting. He kept interrupting.
Yeah. And like for me, I'm with you. Like just say yes or no. Or if it needs clarification, say, well, this is how I handle it. If it's like, well, yes, well, I'm going to tell you yes, and here's what I mean by that. You know, that because that clarifies where people are. Like so many debates start with one person thinking that we're on this page and the other person says we're on this page, and then they're going at it debating, but they're not even talking about the same thing.
Right.
You know, that's why clarifying, you know, oh, hey, do you believe in God? Well,
it took me 40 minutes to answer
that. What I would say is I would probably say yes, I think so, and here's what I mean by that. And I would go into talking about how my level of understanding, like I said earlier, is that the energy source or whatever is everything, that called the source of everything. That's kind of what we give God titles to and labels to. So whatever that is, I think is probably it. And I don't entirely know, but I haven't staked my life and career on it, which I have so much respect for you. And I tell you this wholeheartedly because I've told my wife, I said, you know, I think if a lot of preachers, especially if they've been in ministry a long time, if they found out they were wrong, I don't think they have the guts to leave or admit it.
Yeah.
Lose your friends, lose your reputation, lose your paycheck. You're looking at the whole quote legacy that God had. You know, you're looking at, you built the thing up and then you destroyed it. You would be seen as the Christian failure, the downfall of so and so, whoever's next.
Yeah.
And you know, you were honest enough to go, you know, this isn't doing it. And like I'm not gonna keep going in this direction. Most people don't have the balls to do that. Most people in ministry don't have the balls to do that, especially the longer you are in. And if you actually come to the point where you realize this really doesn't hold up, you know, it's especially if you built a career, the longer you're in something, then you know, you tend to rise up in the ranks.
Yeah.
You know, and then everything it'll cost you. Most people don't have the guts to do it. And so when I see people like yourself who do, it's and I'm not saying that to try to make you feel good. It's just be like, this is a guy who did the thing that I was telling my wife people usually won't do. This guy actually did it.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's
and with your impressions, you remind me of Ernest. Jim Varney. I don't know if you ever heard that, but when you do your impressions, I'm like, he's like the preacher who's like Ernest, but a preacher, but used to be. But
yeah, that one clip that you that you and your wife were watching on your TV, I just couldn't help it. I had forgot that clip, you know, and when you watch that clip of me saying, you know, we're all in church saying, you know, feed me more, you know, whatever I was doing. I showed it to my wife. I was like, I forgot that I did this. And she goes, that was freaking hilarious, hon. Of course, she thinks I'm, you know, funny. And, you know, I think I'm funny. Clearly, I think everybody kind of thinks they're funny. But, you know, for me, it's just, I was like this as a preacher. You know, that's partly why I had a church of 300 people. I started at my living room with 10 people, grew it to 300. And I think it was because I was like this, you know, I was just expressive and wild. And, you know, people say, well, you were lying. You know, atheists will sometimes say you were lying. Yeah, but I didn't know it. You know, I was very sincere.
Yeah. There's a difference.
I really, really, really believed it, man. I really, really believed it. And so when Christians want to say, well, you never really were a Christian, it's like, you're a moron.
Well, you know what I say to that? You know, I always say to that, it's like, well, did you believe in Santa Claus as a kid? Yes. Do you believe in Santa Claus now at 38? No. Well, you never really believed in Santa Claus then. Exactly. Like it's that dumb. But again, that's another one of those excuses they use when they hear you deconstructed or whatever you have, you know, an argument. It's just they don't resolve. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So who do you think Jesus was?
Gosh, at this point,
that had to have changed. Like from what you initially thought, he was the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him.
I guess at this point, I think the most honest answer is who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, everything I've ever been taught about Jesus, I've been taught by people who had an agenda and a reason to teach me about him. And the only records that exist are from those same people or people who existed before them that were in the lineage of the religion who also had a reason. Um, I also hear people say, this is another thing. Well, the disciples, they all but one or two died brutal deaths for their faith, right? Nobody dies for something they know to be a lie, right? You heard that before.
Yes.
I will debunk that right now. Even though people might not die for something they know is a lie, they will die for something they believe to be true that simply is not.
Right.
And the proof of that, the suicide bomber who tried to kill me in Kandahar on July 24th of 2006 believed in what he was doing.
Yeah.
He believed God told him. He believed it was right. He believed in it, and he did it. He died for what he believed in,
Yeah.
for what he believed to be true.
Right.
Now, if it's true that Christians say, well, nobody dies for things they know are a lie, well, then they have to admit that the suicide bomber was right.
Right.
But they can't do that because they're Christians.
Right.
Because that guy literally did it. Now, but in my opinion, or in a Christian's opinion, he has to be wrong.
Right.
So it doesn't hold up. It's
Right.
my whole life. At this point, I'm just like, it's okay not to know, but I'm searching.
Right.
And I don't know what other path we ever could have been on.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm not going to build up a hill that I now have to defend that's based on only my current level of understanding and say, this is all there is. Because it's not.
Right.
I look at science 400 years ago. Oh, we didn't have science 400 years ago. And now we do, like you said, with the stealth jet 500 years ago. Like, what the hell was that? Must have been aliens. We don't know what we don't know. And I say this about it's most people, but especially if we're talking about Christianity or any religion, it's what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's this idea. It means people are so unknowing they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Like they lack so much information, they don't realize how much information they lack.
Right.
Like you literally don't know what you don't know because you don't know so much.
Right. Right.
And I'm open to the fact that that's been me in a lot of cases, and then I'm still open. I'm still probably that, and I'm searching honestly, and I'm not trying to tell people it's only this way.
Yeah.
But like you said, with the Truman Show thing within the church, it's a Dunning-Kruger effect. It's like they're in this matrix, they're in this system, and it's programmed. I mean, if you don't think it's psychological conditioning, that's a nice way of saying brainwashing. Look at Christianese. Has its own language, their own things, their own programming, everything built up to try to fortify it and defend it, even when it's not defendable. And I don't take joy in dancing on the grave of this thing. I'm just glad I'm out of it.
Yeah.
Because it just didn't turn out to be true. And if there are elements of truth, like I said, I'm an open-minded agnostic is what I'm basically at this point embracing.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm open. Like I'm totally open because to me, that's the most honest position, at least I could take.
Yeah.
I'm open to it, but so far Christianity, with what they're offering, it is not looking good.
Yeah.
It's not resolving. It's just not.
I'll ask you a question that I get asked a lot, and this I'm curious what you'll say. Could you ever go back?
Going back to
Christianity.
Going back to Christianity being what it was when I left, absolutely not. If we learned more things and it started to resolve and be true, then I would look at it and go, okay, these dots obviously connect. Wow, like this makes sense now. And maybe in 500 years that'll happen. I doubt it, but if it did, but as Christianity stands now, there's no way I could go back. I mean, I was in a church service for a funeral recently, and just being in there, hearing someone preaching the message, I could just hear the undertones. And it was like getting horse shit shoveled back on me. I'm like, I left this. Then they gave an altar call at the end of the goddamn funeral, man.
Oh man.
Like, oh, get people emotional, and there's a chance to try to get them. It's like, come on. And I know in evangelical Christianity, that's normal, as you know. Every chance for an altar call, you give one. So it's like I don't even blame the person doing it. I know the person, he's a good dude. It's a programming though. That's just something you do. It's like maybe I don't know. Maybe don't do that because it could be seen as manipulative. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Only the person doing it thinks it's a good idea. Like even Christians will say, yeah, I didn't like it at the end. The preacher gave an altar call at my grandpa's funeral or what. Even Christians, it's only the person that's actually doing it that thinks there's some kind of justification. I scroll through and watch little shorts often, and there's just a plethora. My algorithm is filled with not only deconstruction stuff, but also Christian preachers and nutballs out there. And some kid in this short was standing on a table inside of Starbucks preaching, Jesus is the way and the truth. And if you don't give your life to Jesus, you're going to burn in hell and blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, everybody here is just enjoying coffee, trying to do some work. And your moronic self is, what are you doing? You have no respect for anybody else around you. You're just going to barge in and just say what you think to be true when it's clearly not true. These people probably have wonderful lives. They're doing just fine. Just stop about your stuff. Just, it's like Jesus said, live quietly and be peaceable and, all that. It's like, guys, most Christians don't even live according to how Jesus was talking about how to live. It's
then they go, but he said go into all the world, but it's like that kid I'll tell you this right now, that kid standing on the table, he justifies it by saying, well, I'm doing it for God and that trumps everything. The problem is that's how suicide bombers become suicide bombers.
Interesting.
Because it goes to an extreme.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty extreme going into a coffee shop, standing at a table and yelling at people, get saved. Like that's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
But that's the beginning of the journey. You can escalate somebody like that.
Yeah.
Because that person is taking the bait and they believe they're doing it for God, which trumps everything and everybody. It's totally justified. Just like in the Old Testament, killing babies and your neighbors. That's the beginning of the suicide bomber mentality.
Yes.
Because it's you don't just one day walk out of your mosque or church and go, I learned this religious lesson and I think I'm going to go fucking blow myself up now and kill a bunch of people.
Right.
It's a baby step escalation into extremism.
Yes.
And anything on an extreme end is bad. Too much of anything is a bad thing. Too much going to church too much 3-4 times a week is too much. Because every kid I knew in youth group whose parent was in ministry and they had to be there every day after school, they're all atheists now. Right. It's like, oh my God, you hear they fell away? No, they didn't fall. They ran.
That's right.
And they're better people. And they're better people than you. And you just don't see it. Yeah. But that's that extremism though. The dangerous part of that. And I'm not someone who's like, oh, they're sold out to Jesus. That means Christian nationalism, which it can. I don't jump rope. I don't jump things like that, but even though it could lead to that, but little things lead to big things.
Yeah.
Baby steps. Nobody becomes a suicide bomber overnight.
Right.
It's slow conditioning and justification. Next thing you know, you got your preacher or your leader, whoever it is, saying, hey, we should do this because God told us to. And next thing you know, you either have a Muslim suicide bomber or you have, the Israelites in the Old Testament with the Christian God telling them to murder their neighbors and their babies. And so it just,
That's a very interesting analogy. I never really thought of it like that, but that's true. It's the Christian that's standing on the table disrupting people's, coffee time and break time and work time or whatever is him forcing his beliefs on them, regardless of whether they believe it or want it. They're just doing it out of their own. That's exactly like a suicide bomber.
And the Muslims better not do it to him. The Muslims and the Mormons better not do it to him. Yeah, he'll do it. And it's okay when he does it because God's on his side. Right.
Right. I mean, everybody makes fun of the Jehovah's Witnesses that come, 2 by 2 riding their bikes, that's a joke. Everybody talks about that, and no one likes it. I remember that's happened to me so many times. You know, I've had it happen here where I live in Kansas City, where I'm walking on the street corner and there's someone on there standing on their little soapbox with a bullhorn with a big sign showing people falling off into hell, you know, and he's
Scare
preaching.
tactics.
Yeah, it's just like,
The
dude.
last desperate attempt of a man who lacks an intelligent argument. Scare tactics.
Absolutely. You have to use fear. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
One of the greatest tactics used in evangelical Christianity is fear. Fear of hell, fear of eternal punishment, a fear of separation from God, fear of not ruling and reigning with God, like all these things, you know, all of it completely horse shit. It's all made up. But back to your point, you know, is there a God out there? I don't know. And no one knows. The people
and in
that
what
say
concept or form? Like,
yeah.
I'm open to it.
Exactly what you said earlier. Yeah. You say, do you believe in God? Well, which one? You know, I mean, like which God are you talking about?
I think they're all, I think people all came up with a bunch of bad examples of like maybe the one thing we're all trying to put our finger on and we just haven't been able to. And then we have agendas and purposes and, you know, and then it just gets all convoluted. But yeah, I mean, I just say the way I think of it is like, it's just the one thing.
Yeah.
The one source of everything that exists is, that's what else could we attribute the label God to? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's, to me, it's like, it's the one thing through which everything came and comes, and whatever that is, like, you know, here's another thing too. People say, you know, Christianity, they would say people claiming to be God, like, oh, don't try to take God's place. Have you ever thought about, like, if God is the energy that makes up existence, like whether it's a personal thing or not, it's just the source. Well, what if you're like the index finger and I'm like the pinky nail?
Yeah.
It's like, what if you're God's index finger and I'm God's pinky nail? Does that mean we're God? Like, is your finger you?
Yeah.
Or is it separate from you? And it's not like, oh, I'm God in the sense that I'm combative with God and I'm taking his place and taking over. That's a very admittedly Christian way of thinking,
Yeah.
and religious way. But it's like, if it is the branch part of the tree, it is part of the tree. Well, is the branch on a tree? Is it the tree?
Right.
And so if someone says, well, what if we're God? And it's not in this, I don't think of that in the sense of trying to take over and fight and defeat God like the Bible would say. It's more like
collectively. Yeah. Collectively.
What if I'm a branch on the tree and you are too, and we're all the tree?
Yeah.
And who knows why that is? At this point we don't know. But what if that actually makes a lot more sense to me?
Yeah.
And if we are, it's like, okay, like my branch probably isn't better than your branch. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
I didn't even make me the branch, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah, I didn't make myself. I'm just here. I don't even know.
There it is again. I didn't make myself. So why am I responsible for the free will that I apparently have, even though I have a sin nature by the God who made me?
Yeah.
Like I said earlier. It's all very confusing.
Yeah. So since your deconversion, you know, when you finally were like, okay, no, I don't believe in the Christian God in this way. What has life been like for you? And, you know, you said you were married and you guys have been deconstructing together, which is wonderful. That can be a real challenge on a relationship, specifically if one person remains fundamentally Christian. You know, I've said this before, you know, my wife's very spiritual, but she's not fundamental Christian. You know, like all the things I say against fundamental Christianity, she's in agreement with. You know, she just believes, you know, that there is a God or there's source, or, you know, she just has her own beliefs. But, you know, we completely are compatible because neither one of us believe in the fundamental, you know, evangelical Bible thumping God. Like neither one of us believe that. Clearly, you know, I'm atheist and she's spiritual, but again, neither one of us are fundamental.
Well, you're making space for each other to be who you are as individuals at your current level of understanding of things. Nobody's trying to force the other one into their box that they've been
Absolutely.
taught they're supposed to stay in,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
Now, yeah, like my wife and I, gosh, we have more fun, better conversations, better sex. Everything's better since
Yeah.
getting like, oh my God, like when you realize you are not a natural born piece of shit and you realize, like, really deeply realize it's okay to feel good. It's
Yeah.
okay to be what you are. It's
Yeah.
so like when you like not just hearing it, when you like really deeply realize it's okay to be me.
Yep.
I'm not hurting people. I can't do messed up things. You know, we all have that
Sure.
moral standard compass. We have some idea of bad and good. But when you genuinely realize like there was never anything wrong with me.
Right.
It's okay to feel good. I mean, every like it's almost like once we started pulling these things out of Christianity, going, we're always taught not to do that. What do you say we just like, I don't know, just kind of like explore. Let's just see, if we'll get smited and struck by lightning. Turns out not only do we not get struck by lightning, some of these things are pretty great
Yeah.
and really fun. And it could be anything.
Right.
But it's like, oh, go see the rated R movie. Oh, Passion of the Christ was rated R. Oh, I didn't realize the best-selling Jesus movie of all time you can't go see because it's rated R. Especially if you're in Bible college, you can't go to movie theaters.
That's right. Yep.
But like the more we just like, what about that? We never explored that. Let's explore that. And we go, oh my God, that's so amazing! Wow, that was fun, and we didn't get smited. But then the whole thing is like, oh, you wait till you die. I'm like, that's at this point, dying is going to be one of the most exciting days I've been looking forward to my entire life because I am so curious what's next. And maybe there is no next. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm like eternally curious. And I see no reason for there to be something wrong to look forward to.
Right.
Like, I don't know. If I was an evil person hurting people, I think maybe the hell would be in my own head suffering what I've caused other people to suffer.
Yeah. And you would have a right to be scared about the afterlife if you were a bad person.
Exactly.
But that's something people ask you, are you scared of hell? Do you ever worry that what if you're wrong? And I'm like, no,
For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely not. And nothing has ever felt better than not believing in that hell, especially when you learn where that current Christian concept of hell came from. When you really know where it came from, it didn't come from the Bible. I'll tell you that much.
No, it did not.
It may have had roots in some pagan religions, which, well, that should cause you to question it because, those aren't the right people. So where did that come from? And then even the Old Testament, like I said, their version of hell is different than the New. It's like same God. Like you should look into this, and then you realize, like, even if I'm wrong, how the fuck could I know if I was right?
Right.
Because there's so many clashing ideas. Yeah. It's like, why even be afraid? And I don't see any reason to. I'm at a point right now, I'm just loving being me. It's okay to be me. It's okay to feel good. There was never anything wrong with me.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, you realize that. And it's like, yeah, I'm not a perfect person, but there was never anything wrong with me. It's okay to be me. I'm not perfect, but I'm always trying to be better. But man, it's so free.
It's very freeing.
Yeah, like the truth will set you free. It's like, yeah, it's not in there. It's out here. like that's what they didn't tell you. They told you to look in the wrong spot.
Yeah, that's I said it often. The pursuit of truth is what led me right out of Christianity. And I left, people talk about backsliding, that term, because that comes out of other circles, they're backslidden. They've walked away from God. It's like, no. I walked right into truth and honesty and authenticity. And, I feel better than ever. I actually am more moral today. I don't hide and lie and deceive and cover up and all the bullshit that goes on in the Christian world. And of course, that doesn't mean there's no God. Just because Christians are hypocritical, or people in general can be hypocritical, it doesn't mean there's no God, but it definitely means that the stuff they're selling is bullshit and it's not working. And I'm not buying it anymore. And
they're not any better than everyone else. Like they're not doing it. They're just not talking about it.
Dude, I pastored a church of 300 people. Let me just tell you right now, people are people. I don't give a fuck what they say they believe about Jesus, heaven, hell, demons, devils, all that stuff. People are people. People in the church are no different than people outside of the church, except everybody in the church are hiding and lying and living hypocritical lives. Not everybody, but a lot of them are. They just act like they're better. But I mean, we could do a 10-hour podcast on all the scandals, all the times that we knew of people that said one thing and did another, the times that we said something and did the opposite behind closed doors. Like, it's just like, to me, something, Neil deGrasse Tyson said this, and I thought it was brilliant. If Christianity was true, like really truth with a capital T, really true, you would see it. There'd be evidence of it. People's lives who were Christians would be better than people who aren't. And that is empirically false.
Well, you look at the divorce in the church and outside the church. There's no difference. No. Like, your way isn't better.
Right. Right.
I mean, yeah, as a husband, you can be like, obey me. God said so. You can use the Bible verse against her, and like we know, people who do that like to forget the following verse too, about love your wife as Christ loved the church and all that. But it's like, yeah, you just have a little more material to use to kind of get your way if you really want to push it and twist it.
Yeah. Did you lose a lot of friends in your deconstruction?
The funny thing is, well, to not do a Jordan Peterson on the big, yes.
It didn't even take me 4 minutes to answer that question.
It actually could. Yes, but it wasn't in the way I thought. It wasn't the people reaching out saying, hey, we don't like you anymore. What happened to you? Everyone just stopped showing up. People stopped hanging out. People stopped texting. People stopped liking Facebook posts or commenting. It's almost like they just ceased to exist in my life. And yeah, and there's I used to have a lot of engagement. And it's like they just sort of like a mass exodus, they just sort of went quiet. They didn't some unfriended me, then one added me back. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. Then I unfriended him. I'm like, I don't want somebody half in and half out.
Yeah.
God bless you, whatever that means to you. Yeah. But yeah, it was people just sort of went crickets. They just went silent.
Yeah.
And they don't really, And so I get it. People don't like confrontation or whatever. Or I mean, I know they don't have any fucking answers. So it's like anything they could ask me, if they know me, they know I have questions they can't answer. And so nobody wants to walk into that ambush.
Yeah.
So I wish them the best. I don't hate them.
Sure.
Wish them the best, but
I enjoy good questions. When I still have
love good questions.
Or I get questions from, Christians, either friend or foe, in the comments. And if it's a genuine heart, they're curious, they're genuinely curious, what was it for you that made you walk away? Okay, I'll answer that question. But too many times they're not really asking questions. They're preaching or judging or saying just ridiculous, uneducated things.
They got their apologetics handbook and they're looking up your answer to look up the rebuttal to put in the comment section.
Yeah. Rather
just
than
to argue.
Sincerely curious. And that's, when someone asked me this early on, this is before I became an atheist. They asked me, and I think they might, I've said this before, and I can't remember if it was a Christian that asked me this or was it another religion, someone from another faith. But someone basically said, what if you're wrong? And because, I've been wrong before on things. And that question just really planted itself as a seed in my head. And I would often think, the things that I would say, then in my mind, I would say, or hear myself say, is that true though? Is that actually true though? And it just caused more questions, more digging, more man, what if I'm wrong? Because I think this person's wrong. I think this person's wrong. I think this Hindu's misguided. I think the Jewish person needs Jesus, clearly. I thought all these other things and people were wrong. Well, man, I would have to be a bona fide, arrogant a-hole to think that I'm not wrong. And so that question just really plagued me in a good way and really started opening up my mind to where I said, you know what, I've often said, this is true. Noah built an ark and, all that. And then the more I'd started looking into like, is it possible that's not true? And then I got amongst the more liberal Christians who believe that actually wasn't a factual story. Like Jewish folks, they were like, well, of course, that's all allegory, Timmy. Nothing, like, that's not actually true. God didn't actually create the universe in 6 days. I mean, that's not actually true.
Yeah, the people who wrote the story, are like, that's not actually true. And all the Christians are like, and all the Christians who came after him are like, it's literally true. And the people who wrote it are like, it's not true. Can you imagine how much elephant crap would have been on that ark for a year? It would have sunk the boat, just the elephants. But I digress.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, there's a funny story to that, and then we'll wrap it up here. I heard a story. I can't remember what it's called. I watch so much online, but there was a book written. It was written as fact. Okay. Well, then it created a bunch of conspiracy and all this stuff, and the author himself was interviewed and said, yeah, no. Like, that's a work of fiction. I just created it like it was a real story. It's not actually true, but it had a whole cult following who actually started badgering the guy that wrote it, who said, no, guys, like, no, it was not true. And they're beating him up saying, no, it is true. He's like,
sounds like a religion's about to start and they're about to crucify the guy who's the founder. Where have we heard that before?
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Vaguely.
Well, dude, listen, I know we could talk forever, but before we go, what social media do you have that you share? What do you got going on? And I'll link that stuff in the description below for people to find it quickly.
I did start a YouTube channel called The Right to Think. And so I sent you a link. If you want to see more conversations like this and my thoughts and questions about things of spiritual, existential questions and asking these questions about just very fairly and just, hey, what does this mean? Questions that are just very honest, but they're also deeper. If you're a surface level thinker, it's probably not for you. Yeah. But if you're someone who's searching, I'm presenting questions and we're exploring those. So you can find me on YouTube, Brian Fleming, at The Right to Think. And if you want to see more about what I've been doing the past 17, 18 years as a professional speaker, go to blownupguy.com, because I'm a guy I got blown up. And so that's my website for the speaking I do for different companies and corporations.
So you still do the speaking?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I still do that, just not really with churches.
Okay. So you had done, so now it's just a secular talk.
Yeah. Well, and I always enjoyed that more anyway.
No altar call in?
No, thankfully I never had to sign that in the contract. I actually always enjoyed the corporate gigs more for some reason, and not that there was any, I knew there to be anything wrong at the time, but
sure,
I never felt like church was like my exact place, even though I've spoken a lot of churches.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds over the decade and a half.
Is that your full-time job?
Yeah, I'm retired out of the military, and so there's that. Then there's, speaking. I've written a few books. It's been a few years since I did that. Yeah. One of my books I actually took off the market because it was part of my Afghanistan story, but I was so in that religious evangelical box that I look at it now and go, one, this isn't me. And two, this, I can't even see this as true with how I framed it. Again, I was, like I said in the beginning, I was given a sort of, in a way, a framework through which to see my devastating experience, which again, it was helpful. but it wasn't the only framework I think that could have helped.
Sure.
And I see now that there are some holes in it. So it was a good thing for me for a time. But when
Yeah.
I started demanding real truth and not letting up, um, it didn't resolve. And
Yeah.
so in a lot of ways, so yeah, if you wonder if I talk a lot, yeah, I've told that story a million times. It's what I do, for a living. I go around, I give, professional speeches, how to stand firm when everything around you is blowing up.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's that. But I'm at a point in life where I think I'll always do that because I love talking to people and helping people. But I'm at a point now. I'll be 41 in October, and I don't know about you, man, but there's something about 40 with me. Something about 40 where you stop giving a fuck what people think. You
Oh,
realize,
absolutely.
older, younger, nobody knows anything.
Yeah.
And wisdom does not always come with age.
No.
um, and I'm very curious about these deeper things of life, like we've been talking about today, and that's been a major shift in my life, and so it's
Yeah.
something of major, huge interest to me, which is why I started the YouTube channel, The Right to Think.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, brother, I really appreciate it. And I think that that's fascinating that you said that, because the framework piece, I've known of people who have been addicted to drugs, and, Buddhism is the framework that set them free. And then, Christians, it's Jesus that set them free. And then someone else, it's another, people often think that their framework is the framework. And, I've definitely learned as I'm now in my 50s, I'm 56. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat, and to say that, my way is the way for everyone else to also join in believing the same way I do. I don't subscribe to that anymore. And, that's just proved that out in my life. There's a lot of ways to, live life and enjoy life. And just like you, when I was a Christian, I thought that was the only way. There's only one way to have a full life, with purpose and meaning and all the stuff. And here I am, an atheist, and I would say, no, I'm living a more fulfilling life with more purpose and more joy. I mean, explain that. I can't explain it. Just
Yeah.
like you, I have my evangelical brain saying that's the devil giving you a false sense of peace. It's like, okay, Christian.
Well, it's just like I said in your group the other day, the Timmy's Deconstruction group on Facebook. I put a post that said, I have this t-shirt just like this one, but it has bold white letters. And I was walking out of the gym and my wife snapped my picture, and it says in bold white letters, question everything. And my advice to people is beware of anything you're taught not to question. Now,
Absolutely.
the funny thing is Christians will go, amen. And you're like, question what you've been taught about your concept of God. They go, well, I'm not going there. Well, then you're not amening this because you're not willing to go there. And I'm not trying to be a dick, but like I see that and it's comical.
Yeah.
But why? I just don't understand why we would be taught not to question something. It's because whenever you do that, because I said so, you tell that to your little kids. It's because you don't want to fight. You want compliance. You don't want to fight. You don't want to have any more work in this. You're arguing. You don't want to have to defend your position.
Yeah.
Well, as adults, we need to question things, and we discover. I mean, that's how we discover scientific things. We ask questions. That's why I think science is more honest than religion.
Absolutely.
It's like they ask questions, and they're like, if we're wrong, we're kind of happy because we discovered this other thing about how this all works, and it's just cool.
Yeah. I'm with you too. I think that's the one thing I appreciate about science is they're definitely willing to say that they were wrong when the evidence supports that. Whereas religion, the more evidence that debunks what they believe, they just double down.
Yep.
Double down. Well, brother, man, listen, such a joy. I'll have you back on here again, and we'll tackle some other topic. And I really appreciate you coming on the Timmy Gibson show, and look forward to seeing you again, brother.
Hey, man, you've been awesome. Thanks for having me on.
You bet.